Welcome to Techtastic, where we navigate the intersection of technology and business, uncovering innovations that redefine our world.
Josh, welcome to It's Techtastic. It is lovely to have you here.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
So you've got an interesting background that I think in some ways you and I have a lot in common. So a long time ago, I started a venture studio also.
Really?
Yeah, we're fractional CFO, CTO, CEO for a bunch of fledgling startups that we helped out. And part of course, that is helping them raise money. We weren't the ones putting money in, though. That's the big difference. We were more of an incubator and less of a venture studio, right? But did that in 99 to 2001 after a couple good returns on some effort I'd put in my life. But then 2001.
Yes. Then 2001.
Yeah. And, the rest is history. Actually, everything we had put money into was history. That was the more truth of it, right?
Most people. Yes.
But I was also young and dumb and didn't really know what I was doing, but thought I did. So there was a lot of hubris involved. But I'm curious about how you got there. How did you get to the point where creating a venture studio was what you had to do next?
By accident. That is totally my response, by accident. And I was dumb and young and that same type of thing. My background is an engineer. Started programming on my dad's Atari, like way back in the day, to where he was just like, I don't know what my son's doing in the basement, but he's doing something. So I was down there hacking away at stuff, and he thought I'd never leave the basement, but I did. I proudly can say I did. But what ended up happening was, over that career, that trajectory of engineering, I found myself at a point in my career where I was at KPMG. I was a director of innovation there. And my buddy called me up out of the blue, and he was like, Josh, I just went out to breakfast with this accredited investor. He had moved out to Silicon Valley a couple years prior. And he said, he just wrote me a check for $150,000 at breakfast. And I was like, what? And so he started talking to me, and he was like, well, can you come out to Silicon Valley and come and help me do this? And I was like, well, I know that sounds like a tremendous amount of money, but it's not. But I will help you figure out how to use that money. And so thus began kind of a little bit of the journey. It started off kind of in a part-time, after hours moonlighting fashion. And then quickly he called me back in a couple months later, and he just said, hey, I've raised over $1 million in seed funding. Is that enough? And I was like, okay, yeah, I think we can start talking about some realistic possibilities here. That kind of started the journey. I quit KPMG, went out to Silicon Valley with him, and it was a wild ride. We were out there for 3 years, and I always tell people I was the absolute dumbest person in the room, and that's the right room to be in, right? It's the right room. So out there, I tell people too, I learned the difference between my background being an engineer. You're taught how to build the thing right. You can pop open the hood, you make it run fast, but you're not really taught how to build the right thing, which is like selling the car if you're popping the hood, making it run fast. So it's like there's a huge difference, and they're two sides of an important coin. And if you're not concentrating on that, you get this as an engineer. I don't know if your background, you've got some engineering blood.
Yeah, I started when I was very, very young, and it was before Ataris.
So you know that, like, I always tell people engineers have this like God complex, where they can like create something, whether or not they should, that's a different question. You can create it. And so that's dangerous, because you go, I can create that. And that's part of the intrigue. And so, out there, what I learned when I first got out there, we had this vision, and what ended up happening was, and we can get into the details of the story if you're interested, of like what we built and other things, but high level, we took 6 months to build our first version of a SaaS product and got it in the hands of users, and realized we built the wrong thing, and then built another thing, but this time we built it in 3 months, and then 1.5. And we kept shrinking that time frame to learn what the wrong thing is to build. And we did that over 3 years. We built, I think, 12 or 13 different apps, wildly different value propositions, trying to solve similar problems, different angles. And we just learned lean startup. That's really what it was, is like learning lean startup tactics of market validation, market experimentation, and figuring out what to build and how quickly to find desirability and market desirability. And it was a wild ride.
I've never heard anybody talk about it as how to build things right, but not the right thing. I've always talked about it as the build it right versus build it right now. Right. For me, it was always the mistake we would make is being careful, instead of being like, screw careful, get it out the door. Right. Get in customer hands. By the way, I've done this for a long time, right? I just made that mistake again. And it was because our product is trying to do something that is kind of one of those, like, every software engineer wants to scratch that itch.
Yes.
And it was one of those.
Yes.
And so we're like, oh man, all my engineers are volunteering to work for us, right? Because they just want to scratch that itch. But it's like, man, we can infinitely scale this thing up. We can run it on pennies. It's super efficient, all that. But what does it fix exactly? Like, what's the market opportunity here?
Right. Not so much.
Yeah.
Yes.
Close. Yeah. Not close enough. Common mistake.
Yep.
And even, like I said, repeat founders will make it over and over again, especially if you have that God complex, want to build the right way.
Yes.
And if you make the mistake of getting into a product that is scratching an itch, those are the worst, because it's a rabbit hole you will go all the way to the ground for, right?
Yes. That has got to be the, I speak to probably 5 to 10 founders a week, and that is probably the most common thing we hear is we go, I have an idea, I need to go build it. And then you ask, what market validation do you have? Because that's what an investor wants. They want traction, right? It's like, what market traction do you have? And it's like, well, none. We don't have it because we have to build it. And you're like, no, I don't think you understand what we're talking about. So, yeah.
Yeah. But the funny part for me, though, is I got into development because I had ideas and I needed to get them out. And it wasn't so much the technology itself. It was much more I've always had entrepreneurial mindset. Like, I always there's an opportunity. I can wrap that up in a bow. I know what I need to build. Let's go validate it first. Then let's build it. Then let's go. And this one, though, has been a 30-year bane of my existence. And so it's one of those ones like, no, fuck, we know what we have to build. Let's go build the damn thing. As I said it, was one of those moments where it's like, yep, classic error, like all across the board, right?
Right. Exactly. We've all made it. And it's, in my background, I've built 13 different failed startups. So I can say the scars are there. And almost every single time there is a story of I remember this one time. So the space we were trying to solve, the problem we were trying to solve is 66% of gym memberships go unused, which is, to us, is disgusting, right? Because gyms are making profit on people not using the product that they're charging for.
But it's a guilt tax and the gym knows they're doing it. Yeah.
They know. Yeah. And so we were like, we want to solve this. And I will never forget one of the pivots that in our journey, talking about me building, as I learned this lean startup skill, but I still ended up, so we wanted to gamify it. And so I was like, what we could do is we could create this choose your own adventure story. And then you go down this path and it's a really elaborate story and you could choose and you have to get to do jumping jacks in the end of the story. And then I wrote 30 pages of this freaking autobiography, I feel like, of a story that's just huge. And I could have wrote a page of it and just tested it and been like, do you want this? And clearly within 2 minutes of users looking at it, they're like, I don't want this. I've got my exercise gear on. I'm ready to go. And now I have to read a book. What are you talking about? And so I'm like, oh my gosh, I did it again. You do those things over and over. So,
and it doesn't matter how painful it was. You will make the mistake again. It's just right. Hubris, excitement, the things that make you a good entrepreneur are also the risks that you face.
Yes.
Right? Overly optimistic. Yes. I know the right answer. I've got high conviction, right? All great things.
What's so funny is, I don't know if you experienced this too, because you said you had a stint at doing your own venture studio, is with my own ideas, those are the ones that I have the rose-colored glasses on. But then when I hear other people's ideas, I can poke every hole in every idea, right? And I'm like, I don't know, man. Have you considered this? Have you tested this? And so, but it's with my ideas, I just get blind. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Because you've already convinced yourself, right? You
convinced yourself.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, and I'm always the most interested in things that have proven me wrong. Like Wayfair. I was at Wayfair. I've spent a lot of time there. The founders are friends. In 1994, we wrote here's how the web will transform the world. And we talked about it in 5 stages. And the last stage was all things you would never actually buy online. Live animals, a home, your car, and furniture.
Yeah.
And I was like, nope, that's bullshit. There's no possible way that that's working. And so I had to go there. I had to learn, why did this work? How did you make a business out of this terrible idea? Right?
It's those terrible ideas. Yeah. Even someone like Uber, right? I talk to people about Uber or Airbnb. Yeah. You're staying in a freaking stranger's home. Yeah. So it's like, do you think that if that didn't exist before, you're like, I got an idea. I'm going to stay in a stranger's home in their spare bedroom. And everyone's like, this I don't know what you're smoking, man, because that's a horrible idea.
Well, yeah, you said Uber, and I was reminded before Uber there was the car sharing, right?
Yes.
And at least that was like a rental car. It was like, I kind of get it.
Yes.
It's a dumb idea because you've got the full capital outlay up front, and
Yes.
it's just silly from the economics of it. But when they started doing Uber, I'm like, I don't hitchhike. I'm not getting in some rando's car, right? But they did catch on to a market dynamic that I didn't recognize was there. And that's the part that they de-risked it. They made it like a taxi, like the payment was happening through their app. They were giving you ratings, all that kind of stuff. They de-risked it for you. And I was like, oh, I get it now. But I would have poked 1,000 holes in it. There's no way I would have invested in it.
No way.
Right?
No way. And there's, if you remember, do you remember, I think it was 2000s, a company called Webvan? Do you remember Webvan?
That's familiar.
So they were the first grocery store delivery. Like they were like trying to do delivery.
Yeah,
and so
Webvan.
that story will always, what's so fascinating is you have all these Uber Eats, you've got all these delivery services now that are just super hot, especially post-pandemic, right? And like that was the peak. But like in Webvan days, they just scaled and did the wrong playbook too quickly because they just dumped all this VC money in. They grabbed all these huge warehouses, and you're like, man, you're just scaling wrong. But the funny thing is, years later, we have online groceries, right? I can go and get my groceries delivered. So,
well, that's an interesting point. And actually, most of the big changes do come as the second attempt, not the first.
Yes,
I need to remember that.
I know, exactly. It's good to remember from the past all the mistakes. I tell other entrepreneurs all the time, the first thing you could do that's super easy that not very many entrepreneurs do is go and see if someone's tried this in the past, even if it doesn't exist today. And literally I can't tell you the number of entrepreneurs I've helped reach out to someone who's done it, and reached out on LinkedIn and had a conversation with someone who tried it. And I was like, that is such an unlock to all of these learnings that you can just be like, skip way far ahead fast.
Yeah, so that is a tremendously good advice. And I will take note of that myself, because I tend to look at the failures as a warning sign rather than as an opportunity.
Yeah.
And they gained a lot of knowledge. They spent a lot of money to get there. They spent a lot of blood and sweat and tears to get there. Come on, share the knowledge, man. Like, help me out.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. There's so many, and that, usually when you get them talking, they won't stop talking, number one, which is great. And number two is like, you'll notice they'll always say the phrase, if I could do it all over again, here's what I would do. And then that's when you sharpen your pencil and you go, okay, tell me, sensei, like, how would you do this over again? Right. And you're just really into how you would figure it out today.
As I'm sitting here thinking about it, like I get a little gun shy, right? You try something, you're like, wow, painful, ouch. I don't want to get back into that meat grinder. And so you take a big step back and you look for something else that's shiny. And this is another problem entrepreneurs have, right? Where's the next shiny thing? Whereas the best thing you actually could do is to do exactly what you just said to yourself. What would I do this time if I was to start from the ground up and try again? Yeah. Because you've already got the scars, man. Like, go win the battle now. You got yourself halfway there.
That's right. I'm really, really, really into, and I encourage entrepreneurs, especially like if there's a digital idea, is too often we discount the idea of cobbling together. I call them low fidelity, high manual touch. Like too many people go, oh, no, I need it perfect, especially engineers, right? Yeah. I can design this, I can build this. And you're like, no, run the whole dadgum thing over text. Like you look at Uber, that's how they started. They started as a texting service. And so you're like, people are like, text this number if you need a ride. And people are like, they did? And you're like, yeah, like that's the easiest way. You don't have to build an app. Just go and figure out existing mediums.
One of my good friends, he has a startup in the AI space around property management. And he and I worked together at Wayfair. And he just had a spreadsheet.
Yes.
And he got such high confidence from it. In fact, his initial customers were like, just give me the spreadsheet. You've solved the problem for me, right?
Yes.
Well, he had no trouble raising money because he was able to say, like, look at all the customers I already have. And that was just a spreadsheet.
Those are the ones that I get super excited about. Like the funny thing is, as an engineer, and I don't know how much your audience is technical, but like I won't get technical jargon, but I will say engineers tend to scoff at companies and brands and things that are like, man, this whole company is run off of a spreadsheet. I can't believe, right? It's like, it's got to be better technology to do this. But I look at that now and I go, that's beautiful because you started super simple. You figured out what you should do. Now you've got a scale problem rather than too often we have an over optimization problem as an engineer.
Amen, brother. Like that's a big one for me too. I walked people through like, do you know how many of the biggest deals I've been a part of that happened? First of all, that happened over spreadsheets. It wasn't the contracts that were the problem. It was like the details in the numbers in the spreadsheets, right? And the biggest companies I've ever been at, the vast majority of their operations are in spreadsheets.
Yes.
Right? Maersk doesn't run off of giant, well, they do have giant ERPs and all that, but the vast majority of the actual decisions are handled in spreadsheets. And that's the reality of the world. Well, if they can run a $100 billion a year company with spreadsheets, what are you doing?
That's right. That's such a good early market signal when people are trying to do things in a low fidelity way. Like one of the startups we had been working with, they identified there was behavior happening in Facebook Messenger in these groups. And so they were like, I think there's something here because I'm seeing all these Facebook groups doing these very specific things. And this was in the fitness space. They're releasing these challenges in this very specific way. I bet you if I could get them using this app and I could make an app out of it. And sure enough, like they were able to kind of move a lot of those people over because they found something that people were doing manually first. And they're like, now there's a more automated way. They're like, this is awesome. So yeah
that's huge. Josh, man, I've loved this conversation. Want to keep it going, but we're out of time.
All right.
I would love to consider this conversation, having you on again if you're up for it.
Yeah, happy to do that. Let's do it.
Awesome. Josh, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
And that's a wrap for this episode of Techtastic. I want to thank you personally for joining us, and we'll see you next time. Until then, keep exploring and stay curious. Thank you for listening. If you are new here and enjoyed the content, please subscribe. It really helps us out. And if you are a regular listener, thanks so much for your continued support.
Overwhelmed by tech debt? Discover Vala AI, the solution to tech challenges with the simplicity of a click. No engineering background? No problem. Vala AI enables anyone to effortlessly tackle tech issues, freeing up your time from tech headaches. Make tech debt vanish with Vala AI, where your tech solutions are just a click away.